I should first say that I don't do public engagements at all. So this is my first time talking about myself, as opposed to talking about who I am, my culture and who I am. As of Tuesday last week, one of my other roles for Yorta Yorta is looking after Barmah National Park. So I have a huge, I'm the living Murray Indigenous facilitator for the park as well. So I get to do a lot of things, you know, for country and who I am. But growing up on Cummeragunja was I know we've got an International Women's Day to focus, and I was thinking, I wonder what I'm going to talk about with this, you know, like, growing up on Cummeragunja, yes, it was most certainly was a violent place. During that whole time, my nan had raised me. So I think, my mum and dad in 1976 went to an AC/DC concert and forgot about me in the back of the bungalow. That was okay. I guess in 1976, the government looked after me for 3 months. And then since then, I was a ward of the state until I was 17 years of age. You know, my nan was an alcoholic. My mother and my father was an alcoholic. Pretty much most of my family was. And there were some really good people there who, they weren't alcoholics and they were doing other great things. And so that was my inspiration as well. I went to Echuca High School and I went to Mima Public School. So going to school was really important. I think for me, school was, whether I had shoes or not or the proper things, it was just to get away from where I was. So it was really good just to get to school. I loved maths, chemistry, physics, and a little bit of English, not too much, but I majored in that and I completed my Year 12 certificate, which is under the BCE. Back in the day, I'm sure you guys are doing BCE, but back in the day they didn't have an option for VCAL, so we just had to complete it 50% or not. So I did that at Echuca High School. Since then, knowing education was really important, I thought maybe I could go to uni, and I thought this is just not possible, so I didn't pursue university, although I did get a placement at RMIT when I was 19 years of age. During my primary years and right up until I was 13, I was telling Sally that my nan, I would read to her and do my assignments with her and do all that sort of stuff. And there was this one assessment when I was 13 years of age, I just couldn't do it. And I grabbed the paper and I said, Nan, can you read this to me? And she looked at it and she goes, you know what, I can't read. And from that moment it was such an impact, that my nan couldn't read. So it reminds me of what happened in the past to our people. I'm sorry, I get very emotional about it because they weren't allowed to have an education. So that was sad. So I work in the education space and I do a lot of different things. Then when I went up to Sydney to live for a few years, I got 2 children and I got 2 grandchildren as well. I got accepted into UNSW. And this was a great thing. I was 32 years of age and I went back to uni and I thought this is pretty good. So I studied a Bachelor of Science. I still have 6 subjects to complete it with a double major in Geology and Geography. So my background in that is quite extensive in the water space. So that was, I was really honoured by the elders to give me this position back at Barmah National Park. I also had studied a Bachelor of Laws degree. So I still have 2.5 years before I'm a fully qualified lawyer for that one. So the idea was to combine the law degree with the science degree and work out how I can help my people. The one big thing I guess Sally gets a lot of exposure to me is learning how to speak to the non-Aboriginal group. That's quite a difficult space for us. When you look at it from a women's perspective, it's a difficult position. When you look at it from an Aboriginal women's perspective, it's really quite a really difficult space because, when you're talking about the imposter syndrome, it's not the imposter syndrome, it's just like, they can probably see that I'm black or I'm Aboriginal, maybe I'm not smart enough for them. Would you consider that an imposter syndrome? It's a tough one because, you sit in that space and you think, I'm in the room sometimes with government. I deal with federal government, I deal with state government, I deal with local government, and I deal with non-governmental organisations. And the majority of them are men. And it's quite a hard space because once we start talking as a woman, you think, I wonder if these fellas are going to listen. But once you start talking as an Aboriginal woman, I really wonder if they can even see me sometimes. So, that's quite a big space for us, in the Aboriginal space. We just wonder if we ever get hurt. But as an Aboriginal woman, that's harder. Thinking about what happened to my people a very long time ago, and especially Kamaragunji in our language means my home. It was a place that's just not where we lived, it was where they placed us. You know, it was a place of segregation for our people. You could only go to year 2 back in the day, in my nan's time, probably prior to my nan's time as well. So you were not allowed to have an education because it was part of the Aboriginal Protections Board's White Australia policy. I'm not saying that the White Australia policy didn't apply to Aboriginal people, it applied to waves of migration, so people who are migrating here too, we acknowledge that as well. Education was a tough one because the idea was to bleed out the Aboriginal race. You know, you couldn't get an education, you couldn't practice language, you weren't allowed to do your culture, you're not allowed to go, you couldn't even move about. For the younger mob that are here, you know, you weren't allowed to travel without an exemption form. So if you look up the exemption forms online, you'll see that if you had your name and all the detail about where you were travelling, you could travel. I'm lucky to be able to travel wherever I want, even here today, which was, you know, a great honour for Sally asking me to come. You know, and like I said, I don't do speeches, so it's very difficult sometimes to talk emotionally because I always talk from an emotional perspective. Moving from the times of the exemption period and when the Aboriginal Protection Board policies had phased out, and then to 1967 when the Constitution was changed. You know, we were considered flora and fauna in the Constitution. We had no citizenship rights, whether we wanted them or not. It's not the issue. The issue was that we just, they legislated for us. They couldn't legislate for us, unless they had amended the Constitution and that we were now human and not flora and fauna. You know, these things had a great impact on me growing up because my nan used to wait on a family, a white family not far from where she lived on Kamaragunja. So she'd walk there and look after them and come back again. And, you know, a lot of people don't see the trauma that we see at night with the elders. So it's a very tough space. That's both, I guess I was exposed to that with my nan a lot more because with my nan it was, you know, it was a tough one. She was a kindergarten teacher at school and she taught all the young people who are my elders today. And it was quite funny. I was thinking, how did she do that if she couldn't read and write? So I think she winged it too, you know. You know, and she did a good job of it. It was about looking after our people back in the day. So that was a tough one. Today, you know, going to UNSW, having that opportunity, I got in by having a meeting with the Dean at the university and he quizzed me on some science questions. And I know everything on that science stuff, you know, like I was answering, you know, CU is copper and, you know, and I was answering a couple other things and he says, well, I would love to have you. So I studied 4.5 years at a 75% part-time study at UNSW and it was the greatest exposure I ever had. Having that knowledge actually helped me be able to talk to non-government, to government, non-Aboriginal people in a different way. My nan said, you know, you've got to work together. So that was one thing that was always in the back of my mind about my nan. But I buried her in 2001. And so since then, it's just been such a struggle sometimes. I'm in a very good position. I look after the RTO, which is it's like a mini TAFE out at Barmer. I'm looking at cultural courses. But still, it's a very tough space. Doing the Living Murray project, it's about water. You know, there's no Aboriginal rights for water. You know, and there's no water for the environment, let alone for us. You know, so it's definitely a tough space. I come from a long line of Coopers, I guess. You know, my name, William Cooper, the very famous William Cooper. His brother Robert, I'm 5 generations down from Robert Cooper. So I'm lucky to have that Cooper blood in me still. And the Patton family, so Jack Patton, he started the, you know, and William Cooper and Bill Ferguson and a lot of the, even all the females that don't get acknowledged as much, like Annie March Tucker and, you know, there's a lot of them out there, and Annie Geraldine Briggs, for example. You know, they made a lot of, you know, the movers and shakers of our time back in the day. They paved the way for the freedom that we have today. When I think about going back in time, you know, it's my children, I tell my children the story. My children will tell, you know, my grandkids the story. I'll tell the grandkids my story as well. It's an intergenerational trauma that just gets passed on. I think we're healing slowly, but it's still really a tough space. I guess for future for me, I'll just continue to do what I'm doing. And I hope that I can make a positive impact in the different spaces. I mean, obviously I worked with Sally for a little bit and come in on a couple other different things. You know, and I can really move things when we need to.